how is it possible that, you know, like such a huge percent, almost all of the countries in the world, respond just about in the same exact manner as if they're reading a playbook, regardless of their numbers? Now that's, to me, that's suspicious. Hey everybody, welcome back to Frank and Angie's channel, where we live better abroad or at home. You know, live better, I mean, this is really... All right, listen, let's talk about a few things that are like screaming at me out there. And it's just, I want you to listen to this. Apparently, Alitalia, the national Italian airline, is saying that on their transatlantic flights, I'm not sure if the local flights are doing it, they will not allow people to put any of their, even just their carry-on, on the above carry-on space, you know, the lockers they have above your seats. And the reason they're giving is, you know, the COVID. And this, you know, I see some of this stuff and I just...
You can say COVID, hun.
Yeah, but the thing is that if they wanted to be really transparent, they could say, listen, because of the response to this thing, we're not making ends meet. We have to cut corners. If they said it like that, it'd be more transparent, right? Because if you guys don't know, when you travel out in Europe, the super top of the line budget, and when I say top of the line, I mean the cheapest ones, budget airlines, that's pretty much what they do, although, you know, they only allow you in a very small bag that you put under the seat. So the national airline is starting to act like those airlines, no doubt, to meet their financial obligations. And so that's the thing, is that cutting through these headlines saying, wait a minute, it's not because of the superficial understanding of COVID, it's because of the response that's causing financial issues, even, you know, for the national airline. So, okay, so what else? Oh, and you know, there are a lot of expats talking about moving to Italy, traveling to Italy, having lots of difficulties with the restrictions. And every couple of weeks, the Eurozone is supposed to review and perhaps modify their restrictions. Well, apparently the Italian government has a channel where they come out and talk about these COVID thing. And apparently on their recent video, they had to turn off comments because on all the other videos, just about every comment was negative. So, you know, it just brings to mind, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. So that's what... I just found that interesting, that they had to shut off comments. Yeah, a lot of Italians know what's going on. You know, as in any society, I would say a lot of the elderly in Europe are not very technological, and the younger folks will tell you that. So they're just only getting their information from television. They're not really all that informed. But there's a lot of younger people that are technologically savvy, and they do read and they study, and they, you know, they're just more aware. Okay?
Well, I think you can print out the studies and then give them to your mom or grandma or whatever.
Sure, that's a good idea. All right, so not picking on Italy, not to be outdone, Ecuador. You know, you have expats talking about how open Ecuador is, but you know, what's the other side of that story? Well, the other side of that story, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of regulation, and but the one that stands out is that just to move internally on planes, you know, they're requiring certain tests that, it turns out, I didn't know this, but I just found out, cost a whopping, now this may not sound that whopping depending on where you're from. So like if you're from Northern Europe, you're gonna laugh. But you gotta understand that this is Latin America. And in Latin America, $300 a month, $400 a month, $500 a month.
That's a lot. A
lot of people, that's where they're at. And a lot of these people have been displaced because they can now not even earn that, thanks to the response. Remember, we need to reclassify how we word this dialogue. It isn't because of COVID, it's because of the response to COVID, okay? Because of COVID, if you want to talk about that, the mortality rates are between 1 or 3% globally, with a few exceptions that are a little bit higher. Now, that is typical of global historical influenza type, some years more, some years less. But the bottom line is that the response to COVID is what we're seeing and what we're highlighting here. All right, so $140 in a place where people have to work.
140 for what?
For a test.
Oh,
they expect people to take over and over and over every time they move around, which is just, it's just unfathomable. It's ridiculous. Just saying though, as someone that has lived in Ecuador for 8 years and knowing the people and the situation, just closely, that's a ridiculous amount for them, All right, so these countries are shooting themselves in the foot. Saw another headline, and it's all blamed on COVID, but really it's the response of COVID. I saw something about Australia and how draconian they have come down on their lockdowns. Of course, Panama is still totally draconian. So, and there's a fairly well-known mature travel vlogger that caters to generally people that travel on a budget or travel abroad for the experience, the fun, and for the budget. And even this vlogger is now making videos about how risky travel is for somebody like him and other people like him that could get snatched up in these
lockdowns.
Surprise lockdowns. This whole idea that every 2 weeks you're going to sit here and be glued to these numbers that are, the credibility of the numbers are suspect, and so just to keep people glued every 2 weeks there's going to be some sort of a modification. The whole idea is just to get you focused on the wrong thing. The whole response is the problem. As some of the sheriffs, good, honest, wholesome people, these sheriffs, all right, I guess the dogs didn't recognize the English language walking in these little Italian streets. But yeah, so an attempt at distracting our focus, keeping us focused on this idea rather than the actual fallout of the draconian responses. And but a lot of people waking up, we're glad to hear that. But anyway, I wanted to focus on some of these things that I've been noticing out there, kind of touch on those issues and give you our take on those.
You were talking about the travel vlogger.
And the travel vlogger, yeah, he's making videos about how risky it is and what could happen. The world's going insane, checking people because this testing is not accurate. So, I mean, can they guarantee that it's accurate? No, they can't. So you could be snagged up somehow and caught up and locked down somewhere and made to pay all the expenses. And, for people on a budget, this is a huge risk. And therefore, the response to this issue is how these governments are shooting themselves in the foot. They're destroying their tourism industries, their real estate industries, and a lot of other industries. But the question has to be asked, do they care? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, meaning on social media, and I just want to clarify, when I say expats, it's just a way to address and give an idea of what I'm talking about, not because I want to group all expats all into one conversation, because I don't. I'm friends with lots of expats. I like having expats in my life. I like somebody to speak English with. And other things, friends, that kind of thing. Community, fellowship, all of it. So, but speaking of these other expats, in the middle of all this that's happening, you're still seeing these expats on these expat social media groups. I won't mention the names. Just totally, at least appearing to be oblivious to everything that's going on in these countries and how draconian some of these countries have responded to COVID, and yet still doing their little promotional things so that they can, I don't blame people for needing to make a living and stuff and they want to live abroad, but a line has got to be drawn somewhere where you don't sell your soul. Selling your soul. Anyway, yeah, I imagine that they're just going to keep doing it. All right, so then I saw another report that said that in Europe, fully 50% of the listed COVID deaths are people over 80 years old. Now look, if it was my grandma or my own mom, we're all sorry to see them go, depending on your belief system. And not about callousness or anything, it's just, since when have 80-year-olds stopped dying?
Right. Good point, man.
Yeah. You know, and that's exactly the point. I mean, that's like, you know, the kind of numbers that aren't being put out that should be being put out. I mean, they're put out by lone voices here and there that are being silenced left and right by suable social media giants. All right, so here's another headline. I mean, not a headline, but something as I'm going about my business, I run into, and you know, you get those things that you smack yourself in the head and go, oh my gosh, this is just unbelievable. And here it is. When you go to some of these country websites, you know how State Department has travel warnings, and State Department for the US has travel warnings, and well, other countries have similar things. And for example, like here in Italy, you go to it, and by the way, you can do this for any country. Learn to do this, do it. And you can take that, use Google Chrome. I hate, but use Google Chrome because you can put it in there, and then you can just, a little window pops up on the right corner, and it says, want to translate it, and then it says to English. And you translate it to English, boom, the whole website, you just read it. And like here in Italy, the warning, when you read down, it's a huge list, dozens of ways you can become ill. You know, it's like, say it's got the list of countries, and then you list the country, and then it'll tell you dozens of ways you can become ill. And many of them are virus related or mosquito bite related. You know, they're still talking about Zika. Funny because, I mean, I lived in Ecuador 8 years. I never got Zika. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't, but it's just common sense. If you're somewhere with mosquitoes, I wore long sleeves, you know. I wore long sleeves and long pants on the beach. I just took care of myself, taking responsibility. You know, people used to say, and I think that they were a little off center when they said these things on these expat forums, that some of these countries are the land of responsibility. Well, where's the land of responsibility? You know, when you take responsibility for the information you input into your knowledge base, you know, do your own research and seek out the other side of the story. Don't just buy into the superficial headlines, because, you know, there's an agenda there. So anyway, all right, so I did a bit of studying in my day, and I studied the systems of the old, old Russian communist system, and a lot of these issues with wars and historical issues. And I've studied that how they did things was that the people at the very, very top, because Russia was a huge country before, well, it's still a huge country, but it was even larger back then before it broke up. Some of the republics broke away. And how they did it is the people at the very, very top, the people in command, gave the orders, you know, to the states or cities. And in other words, the orders trickled down all the way to the street, the common policeman on the streets, but they came from high up. So there wasn't an isolated incident of police abuse like that. It was coming from the very, very top, because you know, at that time you had a swamp situation that eventually they get drained. They may stick around for a little while, but eventually they get drained. Okay, it's just a natural order of things. When you see some of these countries that are doing good, and then you know, for a few weeks or something, and then all of a sudden things start changing for the worse. It's just almost, you can predict this now. Any place where you know, doesn't seem to really be doing as bad, all of a sudden you're going to start seeing headlines where, oh, new figures coming out, and they're always higher and worse and worse and worse. And you know, I won't name the countries because I don't want to do them a disservice, but I'm saying that I'm seeing that pattern where, you know, there's something, and you know what, there's to the skeptical mind that hasn't done this kind of in-depth research, historical, it comes down to knowledge base. They don't really have the depth of understanding because of the lack of historical study, and therefore they can't piece together how there could be some sort of global conspiracy. It seems unfathomable, and I see this. A lot of people are like, how can this be? How can this be? Well, this is how it can be, because when you study because these systems, referring to the old Russian communist system that get really big, that's what it is. What it was a consolidation of power, which is what you're seeing in Europe and globally. So it's a consolidation of power where when you consolidate power to a small few that, rule over many like that, then it rolls downhill. Water rolls downhill, as they say. And so it comes from the top down. So it's a top down system. And so what you've got here is a situation where there's a setup there for global agenda, which is to rule the world globally, okay? So now, you may not believe that, you may or may not want to believe that, but this is how it was done in the old systems. And what you're seeing is these similar systems from the old systems rearing their ugly head once again, that they are trying to rear their ugly head, and the only thing that's going to push them back is you and I, we the people. So that's why you see some of these countries that for like weeks now, 4 weeks to 8 weeks, couple of months, 2-3 months, very few of them, by the way, that, oh hey, guess what? We didn't have that issue. We didn't do any of the things you did, and nothing happened. Everything's normal, okay? Even though some of these places do have elderly, but they take care of their health in some of these places, okay?
Well, a lot of the places that didn't shut down actually took measures to take care of the elderly. They had them self-quarantine and told them don't come out right now and stuff like that.
Okay, so they took care of their at-risk group. They didn't just start whipping everybody down. They took care of their high-risk group, and then the rest of them, just take it easy, right? I would say, to those people that just have difficulty connecting dots, because, I understand it is challenging to do. And I would ask yourself this question: how is it possible that, like such a huge percent, almost all of the countries in the world, respond just about in the same exact manner as if they're reading a playbook, regardless of their numbers? Now, to me, that's suspicious. That's a suspicious part. Not questioning how likely is this to be some kind of huge global conspiracy. That's not something that most people are going to easily put together. But just the responses, the draconian responses, are suspect. We get to have an hour conversation just about that. All right, well, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Do subscribe, notification bell. Give us a thought in the comments. Tell us what other kind of content you would like us to make for you. Let's have a discussion and a dialogue best we can in the comments. Thanks for coming to our channel, and have a nice day.